Makes games, acclaimed platformer Celeste, has sold over 500,000 copies since launching back in Januar. Game director and designer Matt Thorson broke the news on Twitter and promised to update Celeste with some new farewell levels in 2019. First-month programmer Noel Barry initially created a prototype of Celeste for the Pico 8 virtual game console during a 5-day game jam. That version of the game has since been dubbed Celeste Classic and contained 30 challenging levels designed to test the skills of platforming aficionados and speedrunners. Eventually, Thorson and Barry decided to turn their prototype into a full-fledged release and brought the finished product to the Nintendo Switch, X1, PlayStation 4, Windows, Linux, and macOS earlier this year. Razer and Microsoft are collaborating to release a wireless keyboard and mouse combo designed specifically for the X1. This news comes after Microsoft finally brought mouse and keyboard support to their console last month. Although the new feature seems to only be available to X insiders, it will eventually be opened up to all players. But at an unspecified date, dubbed the Razer Turret, it features a full-size mechanical keyboard with a dedicated DeX key that pulls up the X1 dashboard. The mouse is modeled after the mobile wireless mouse and can sit on a retractable base that slides out from the keyboard. Predictably, the turret is also compatible with PC, so players can switch back and forth between platforms as they wish. The Razer Turret costs $250 United States and is currently available for pre-order on the Microsoft Store. Makes games, acclaimed platformer Celeste, has sold over 500,000 copies since launching back in Januar. Game director and designer Matt Thorson broke the news on Twitter and promised to update Celeste with some new farewell levels in 2019. First-month programmer Noel Barry initially created a prototype of Celeste for the Pico 8 virtual game console during a 5-day game jam. That version of the game has since been dubbed Celeste Classic and contained 30 challenging levels designed to test the skills of platforming aficionados and speedrunners. Eventually, Thorson and Barry decided to turn their prototype into a full-fledged release and brought the finished product to the Nintendo Switch, X1, PlayStation 4, Windows, Linux, and macOS earlier this year. The first chapter of Glenn Parsons' The Philosophy of Design is dedicated to the definition of the word design. Parsons goes through many iterations, finally arriving at design is the intentional solution of a problem by the creation of plans for any sort of thing. I liked this definition at first, but began to grow wary when I thought about how game design fits within it. Most of it fits my intuition quite well. The primary verb of game design is certainly planning. Most of us strive to make as new a sort of thing as we can, given the constraints of hardware, budget, schedule, physics, and imagination. But while we certainly solve many problems as game designers, it's difficult to think about a game as embodying the solution of a problem. What kind of problem do games solve? As an educational game designer, I am trying to solve pedagogical problems, and many other serious games attempt to solve, or at least alleviate, problems in the world. There are citizen science games which tackle concrete research problems. Fundamentally, though, what problem does a game solve? Too much free time, not enough software to sell proprietary hardware. There is an argument to be made that games solve the problem of fulfilling psychological needs in their players or their creators. By this logic, you would have to impart and design together. as the arts are usually associated with primarily being of use, inasmuch as they are able to alter their audience's state of mind. You might be willing to stop there and say that game design is a misnomer, and game designers should instead be called interactive artists or some such. I certainly have some sympathy with this view. I find game design to be very creative in character. But not all creativity is art. There is something about the practice of game design, especially when done in collaboration with the team, which seems more like the design of a chair than like painting on canvas. The constraints are more palpable, the purpose more distinct. Perhaps the definition is still insufficient. Note, the resolution of this conflict, I believe, comes with the realization that coming up with the initial idea for a game is indeed not a process of design, but rather an artistic one. Everything that comes after that is the design part. We are solving the problem of how should we make this. The idea may be a theme, a story, a genre, a feeling, a mechanic, or any combination thereof, but we will always need design to support and realize that idea. Think about it by analogy to the design brief that industrial or graphic designers are given. We need a logo which embodies the dependability of our company and which can be used in a monochrome letterhead. This is not a logo, but is part of the idea for one. In game design, the distinction can get quite muddied, as we are usually not presented with game ideas by a client, but rather by some part of our own team, our own mind, and therefore the process of settling on an idea and the beginning of the design process blend into one another temporarily. Skeptics of this notion might argue that this kind of artistic invention happens all throughout the process of game design: stories, visuals, music. So why should the initial idea be privileged in this way? I would respond by saying that additional artistic invention act primarily as support for the initial idea, rather than artistic objects in their own right, in the way that additional constructions may be necessary if a geometric proof or floral carvings might give a chair a more old-fashioned character. Taking this to its conclusion, one might say that Michelangelo's painting of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel may be, in fact, an act of design, insofar as the guiding vision behind the project was not an affecting image which depicts God's relationship to man, but an not inspiring chapel, and the painting exists in service of that. I find this realization very freeing, because, though I enjoy the ideation process and of course I have more game ideas that I could execute in 10 lifetimes, it takes the pressure off the designer to create game ideas that fit their team. Those ideas can and should come from anywhere. It also confirms all of our suspicions about those so-called idea men. We tend to meet at parties and in shared lift rides. They may in fact have good ideas, but they cannot be called game designers, because they have not yet engaged in the process of design at all. So, we find ourselves out of the rain and back under the umbrella of design, after all, alongside our brethren in architecture, graphic design, industrial design, etc. Now, perhaps, with greater appreciation for the role of the designer in games and a closer understanding of what most consider the beginning of the game design process, which is not, in fact, game design. Bobby Lockhart is a game designer at Important Little Games and Code Combat. You can follow him on Twitter at BobbyLocks. Note, it's no mistake that this period is outside the quotation marks. The author is using logical punctuation, choosing 10 game developers who left their mark on 2081. Is it? The achievements we saw from game developers, from indie to AAA, were incredible. the way game developers are telling stories, serving their audiences, and helping their employees stay happy, healthy, and creative are evolving year by year. Looking back and seeing all the good stuff game devs have done this year reminds us how games are small miracles, and the people making them are some of the most gifted people around. As always, our annual top 10 list of game developers is not necessarily made up of devs that made the best games, are the most financially successful, are those that does not hurt anyone's chances of making the list. These are the developers and studios that left their mark on this year, in a meaningful way, shaping the art and business of making games. Below, in alphabetical order, are the 10 individual developers and studios